Welcome everyone in a new episode of the Cyber Corner podcast. Basically, after a long absence, I'm here with a new guest, a special guest to be honest. And I'm following his amazing work on a LinkedIn. Guys, later I'm gonna put you all the links about Mike Holcomb. I want to thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Such a pleasure to have you in this episode. And what makes this actually episode a little bit special that we're going to talk about a part of cybersecurity. We know it's cybersecurity, it's so wide, when it comes to pen testing, SOC, whatever. But it's the first time that we're going to talk about the ICS OT side of cybersecurity. So, first of all, if you could absolutely introduce yourself and explain your role in that field.
Sure. No, thanks for having me, Hamdi. I appreciate it. And yeah, no, I was glad you reached out. Of course, we connected on LinkedIn, which you mentioned, where I spend some of my time and post lots of resources in OT or industrial control cybersecurity, and really to help people get into the field or to help owners and operators of these environments become more secure, really, than they were or the day before. So I appreciate that. But yeah, my name is Mike Holcomb. I've actually been in IT cybersecurity for over 30 years. It was kind of like what I always wanted to do growing up. I always wanted to do computers. I always kind of had a kind of a focus from a security aspect. Uh, and so I got to start doing what I really wanted to do as I grew up. Um, when 2010 and when Stuxnet hit though, and for folks that are familiar, Stuxnet's where the American and Israeli governments had created a cyber weapon that would be some malware that would target specifically OT environments. It's kind of interesting. It's an interesting point in history, especially given the events of the last couple of weeks. But it's where the malware went into the Natanz facility in Iran and took over the centrifuges, which would turn the uranium centrifuges, and it was used to cripple the Iranian nuclear program at the time. Of course, we fast forward to 2025, and those sites have been recently bombed. So, uh, so that's how you initially got interested in where I'm at today. So my day job, I am the fellow and director for uh, cybersecurity for Floor globally. We're uh, one of the world's largest engineering and construction companies. There's about 5 or 6 companies at our size in the world. So we build some of the world's largest control system or ICS or OT environments. And then I get to work with our engineers to help design and implement security in these environments. So that's a little bit about me. And then 2 years ago, in fact, actually 2 years ago, we just passed the anniversary. I started posting just educational material on LinkedIn, and then I do YouTube from time to time. I need to get a little bit more regular on that.
To be honest, I think like everyone, who is interested about the ICS, and OT must follow your LinkedIn profile because, each time I found some really, really amazing resources is there. So I am with the perfect person today to talk about this specific field of security. So here, what I'm doing basically, in each episode, that I gather some questions from my followers when it comes to the topic, and this is actually the questions that I found when they ask it. Actually, like this is the most asked question. So people, ask like, what are some of the greatest security challenges that ICS face today? So what kind of threats, what kind of security challenges that, okay, when you're thinking about the threats of ICS right now, we think about that.
Yeah, a couple of big the threats that come to mind. I think a traditional threat we always think of attackers. So when we talk about from an attacker perspective, that's where we look at, prior to the Colonial Pipeline breach, which we had in 2021. So before 4 years ago, most OT environments, they were only worried about state adversaries.
Yeah.
So the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, coming into your environment and usually stealing information, potentially positioning themselves in the environment to make something bad happen one day down the future, down the road. That changed with Colonial Pipeline. Now, when Colonial Pipeline happened, and for those that aren't aware, Colonial Pipeline is the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States. And it goes from Texas, which is kind of in the middle south, and then central south, I guess. And then it goes up to the northeast, kind of like where New York is. And so what happened was a ransomware group had gotten into the environment and deployed ransomware, as they do in IT, and it had started to move into OT. And so they had to shut down the pipeline out of abundance of caution and probably some other reasons, I would imagine, that aren't shared. But they shut down the pipeline, and the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States. And so we saw, like where I live in Greenville, South Carolina, that you would go to the gas station and there was no gas. Now you could go around the corner to another gas station and they would have gas, but there would be a huge line. And then by the time you got to the front, maybe the gas was out. So, so we saw that, yeah, that real world impact. It's very much like, again, I come from an IT background, but if you remember, IT security, at least in the United States, not a lot of businesses took it seriously until we had the target breach. And then all of a sudden, everybody knew they had to do something about cybersecurity. Colonial Pipeline was like the target breach, but for that OT world.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do say the other biggest threat, and it's not a group of attackers, but it's just the fact that there's still a lack of education and awareness out there, whether it's the general public, but more importantly, when we look at the owners and the operators, so we say asset owners, it's the companies that own OT or ICS and Meyer. So if like maybe I think of Shell or Saudi Aramco, like those are some of my big customers in my day job. uh, when you have so those are the asset owners, and then sometimes their own employees will run these facilities, or they'll hire maybe another company to run that for them. Maybe like if, let's say, Shell outsourced running an oil rig out in the middle of the ocean to another company, right? That would be the operators. And so there's still still a lack of education. I think most OT environments in most parts of the world now realize, hey, we need to do something about cybersecurity. But now it's like, oh, they don't know what to do. And it's just like IT security was really like 10 years ago. It's like, okay, now we have an understanding. Okay, we need to do something. Where do we start? That's a big part of, and why I post on LinkedIn and YouTube, because I can help get the education to people, right? So then they can start working in the field to get the experience and additional knowledge that they need to help secure these environments.
Yeah.
Because without that, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, totally right. And I'm totally agree about the point when something bad happen, everyone start to think about investing in security solutions. And everyone just, putting that budget. Yeah, I really, really agree about that point. So here, when you talk about, the incidents, um, what kind of major incident or attack that you think highlight the growing urgency for ICS Audi security? What kind of that kind of attacks that we really scared off to happen?
Yeah, the big one that's of concern, the number one threat to OT or ICS, and we can use those terms pretty much to mean the same thing that in this conversation, but it's the same as IT, right? The number one threat in IT still today and has been for some time is ransomware. And that's really what we saw with Colonial Pipeline. Before Colonial Pipeline, we never really thought of ransomware in OT or ICS. But 4 years ago, that changed. I remember when this group from Russia called Dark Side, right? So I'm a Star Wars guy, person. So it's like, okay, I appreciate the name. Yeah. But they got into Colonial Pipeline and spread ransomware throughout the IT environment and burned it to the ground, basically. And what happened then is it was great because that's where owners and operators and the general public, right, started to understand, hey, there is this thing called OT or ICS cybersecurity. Maybe we should do something about it. Then also at the same time, you had all of the ransomware group operators out there. You had all the hacktivists out there that realized, oh, there's this thing called OT, ICS cybersecurity. We should probably do something about it. And so they realize there's a lot more money that could be made potentially, at least in the short term, right? And they could get paid quicker by attacking these environments. And so that was a big shift that we had seen. But it's interesting because they're and I hate it when people say this from the OT side. They always say like OT and IT cybersecurity have nothing in common. I'm like, oh, they're they have so much in common. There are areas where they are very different. That is true. And it's important to understand where they're different and how they're different. But at the same time, they do have more in common. And so our number one threat is ransomware and OT, just like it is in IT.
Mhm. And yeah, you said that, okay, there was a lot of common between, the traditional, IT networks and, absolutely, the ICS and OT. But right now, when it comes to, like, that kind of difference, between the both, so here come the question, how does securing ICS OT differ from securing the traditional IT networks? Where those kind of different point come between the both.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question because and so I I'd say it goes back to we have to look at how IT and OT are different, but again, we also look at how they're the same. And a lot of people don't realize. So when I went to my first real OT environment, when I first stepped foot, and this goes back like I think 12, 13 years at this point, I went to a power plant, one of the world's largest power plants uh, in in at least the Western hemisphere. And I remember they have every essentially all large OT sites have a plant manager, right? And they'll take you around and show you they make sure everybody stays safe and everything keeps running. And so this gentleman was taking me into the power plant for the first time. And he's really excited because he's like, okay, I want to show you our data center. It's like, okay, great. I'm going to show you, oh, this is where we have our Active Directory domain controllers. So they're like, okay. I was like, well, A, I was surprised he knew what Active Directory was, but he was also talking about, and here they have them in the plant, right? Not on the IC network. This is on the OT net, right? And they have in OT we have what they call data historian. So we're storing data about how every aspect of the environment runs. Well, those are just Microsoft servers, Windows servers running Microsoft SQL server almost always, sometimes Oracle, right? But the point is, it's a Windows machine, right? There's file servers that are running Windows. We have what they call engineering workstations or an operator workstations, which are fancy ways of saying, yeah, it's a Windows laptop or a Windows workstation that someone uses in OT. So there's Windows everywhere that you get to. Yes, we have what more traditional OT components or assets like we're talking about programmable logic controllers, human machine interfaces or HMIs, uh, yeah, and a couple of others. But you know, ultimately, again, there's Windows everywhere. So we have to first, believe it or not, we have to, of course, defend the Windows environments in OT. So that's where in IT and OT have a lot in common. And in fact, most people in OT they don't have any clue about hardening something like Active Directory. right? Or maybe an individual Windows workstation. So that's where they, OT people, can work with IT, and cybersecurity to, lock down those systems, right? It's a great opportunity for those groups to work together. I think it's unfortunately challenging in a lot of environments because people in OTC, oh, well, the number one way that attackers get into our environment is through IT. So we have to protect ourselves from IT. So it becomes this very like OT versus IT type of environment rather than, hey, IT and OT need to work together to keep the environment safe. So I've seen environments of all sizes that uh, some of the largest in the world were OT and IT. It's like they absolutely hate each other.
Yeah,
And
perfect.
they don't get along, they're not talking, they're arguing, they hate I mean, it might sound crazy for adults to be that way, but it's what happens, unfortunately, and so in those cases, nothing gets done, right? So really, the big things in IT and OT is we have to protect our Windows environments and OT. We have to, I hate to use the term, but we have to protect the OT network from attacks that can come from IT. Right? Again, that's the number one attack into OT. So we need to protect. And then we can look at continuing to further secure the environment. So could we look at protecting those OT assets like HMIs and PLC that allow us to watch what's going on with the machines in the real world and control them. Right. So if I have a power plant, I have to make sure like I have a turbine that spins, right? And how fast is that turbine spinning to turn a generator to generate electricity? Right. Maybe that turbine spinning too fast. If it starts to spin too fast, or if it starts to get too hot, I need to slow it down. And so we use systems to be able to watch, okay, monitor, right? How fast is it going? What's the temperature of those blades as they go around? And then make adjustments to speed as time goes on. And so, do we have to protect those systems? And unfortunately, most of those systems, and they haven't changed in 30 years. So they were the basics and the protocols as well as the hardware, right? They were made 30 years ago, which no one was thinking about security in IT or OT. We didn't even have the term OT 30 years ago. And so yeah, it's a challenge because ultimately it is about protecting what we call the process, right? What is that environment trying to do? Right? If I have a power plant, right, it's trying to generate electricity. If I have a water treatment facility, it's trying to clean water, right, and push it out to the public. Right. So we have to be able to protect that process while keeping people safe. I want to make sure no one's getting hurt, no one's getting killed, and making sure, yeah, that process stays up and running, which is what the job is about. So yeah, there's a lot goes into it. But again, there's a lot of commonalities with IT and want people to understand that and not be afraid to jump into OT cybersecurity if it's something that they're interested in.
Yeah. And right now you've talked about when a company has kind of incident, maybe like okay, so right now we have to talk about before that incident. So the thing is like when we talk about strategies, what kind of strategies or control do you recommend, to protect the ICS OT environments? Now we talk about that kind of prevention or the preventive side, like what I have just the strategy that I have to follow to absolutely prevent any issue, later or attacks.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's probably a 40-hour class to really to really answer that. But uh, I always do start with, and again, I have a list, got my top 10. There's also a top five. Sant has a top five that they focus on. Mine's a little bit different. But we can start, I wanted to start with, secure network architecture. That's a big one. And that really is, yeah, it can be how do we you segment IT and OT, right? So in that case, we have a firewall or firewalls between IT and OT. So like a DMC, which we would have in IT between us and the internet. Well, now we have one between IT and OT. So that way we can help control what traffic comes and goes out of the OT network center, right? And we can watch that firewall traffic to also get an idea. Maybe we see potentially an attack. I've actually found state adversaries and environments just watching, firewall traffics, right? What's allowed, what's denied, what looks suspicious, right? What looks different. So that's one thing. Another that just comes down to is backup and recovery. It's another one that it's not really fun necessarily for most people. It's not sexy, right? But at the end of the day, if you get compromised, right, how are you going to be able to restore operations? In most OT environments, like when the Russians turned off the electricity in the Ukraine back in 2015 for the first time. They've done it multiple times since, but if the operators, right, they could go out into the field and turn breakers on because they didn't have access to any of their computers. So they could fall back to what they call manual operation. They could still restore power without computers. But ultimately, you want to be able to restore your computers to be able to get back up and running under automated control. Right? If I'm whether it's a power environment, whether it's a petrochemical facility, maybe oil refinery, like these are dangerous environments to work at. You don't want to have to put people in harm's way. So we want to restore those systems so people stay safe. So yeah, so those are a couple you network architecture, right? And we the segmentation between IT and OT. Then you further segment OT as you have time and resources for it. Backup and recovery. We can talk about secure remote access, right? Making sure that people can come into the OT to do remote maintenance, but making sure that's as secure as possible. That's another big one that we see today. I think another big miss is incident response planning. Right? People, they're not doing tabletop exercises. So when they do have an incident, they don't know how to respond. Right? What if we're starting to see ransomware in IT? Can you disconnect OT from IT, right? Safely, right? And make sure no one gets hurt or killed in the process. That's a question we have to ask in OT that you don't think about in IT. Right. And then do you even know how to do it? And do you know which wire to go pull in in the data center if you need to? Yeah. So there's a lot to protect it. But again, there's just so much in common with what we do in IT as
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And you know what? Like sometimes we see some companies, for example, to protect their IT environment, what they are doing, they are preparing for a disaster recovery process, and they try to make that simulation. But I think when it comes to the OT side, it's really so kind of hard to simulate kind of DR deaths. I don't know because I think like the time and the operations is more important than simulating things. And here come the questions. How can organization balance between operational safety and security, especially when it comes to patching? For example, now I have like an equipment in my OT environment. I want to upgrade it. I want to make a patch. So how I can make the balance between the operations to make things works, and at the same time I want to just make that security thing. So, yeah.
yeah, it's as we say here, right? It's the $1,000,000 question. And if you could really answer that, you could make million or probably billions of dollars, right? So yeah, it's tricky, right? Because like you say, right, it is a balance, and so you look at how do we upgrade these systems, right? Where some maybe they've been in operation for 30, 40, 50 years, right? Which
Mm.
how do you do that, right? You probably don't. Right. There are just
Yeah.
some environments we're not able to. Even environments that might be, 10 years old, you might not even just be able to do it. There's a lot of challenges when upgrading. I think maybe this will help folks understand because when you look at the challenge, like if I have, let's say, a power plant, right? That power plant, right, is designed to be on 24/7, 365 to never stop, ever. Let's- And so when you say, oh, let's bring down the plant so I can do some patching, it's not going to happen. Now, maybe there's a maintenance window that will happen in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so you can have a list for when that day it might becomes. But and there are some environments that you'll just never be able to upgrade. And then you have to then look at, well, how do we, build security around those vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
right? Now, there are also other environments, whether, they're smaller, but have budget or larger environments. And I work with some of the largest environments in the world where they have the resources to build out test environments, or they have even uh, essentially almost like mini backup power plants. Right?
Mm.
So you could actually potentially maybe take down part of a power plant to do upgrades. Again, very, very carefully, right? As you would imagine, and only after a lot of testing, right?
Yeah.
So, but there are, some of those big challenges. Even in, I also work with a lot of kind of side clients and mostly manufacturing plants. Manufacturing is huge where I live in South Carolina. And so even in small plants, even if it only runs like Monday through Friday for maybe 12, 16-hour shifts, that they don't want to do upgrades, right? Because, right, if it's not broken, right, why am I
Yeah.
gonna fix it?
Yeah.
So it's a hard sell like we used to have in IT, right?
Yeah.
Um, Most everybody knows in IT, right? Microsoft Patch Tuesday comes along, right? We hopefully do a little testing and then we can patch. And so
Yeah.
you see you see that at least in OT. Okay, we talked about we have all these Windows machines. We need to at least patch those, right, on a fairly regular basis, just like we do in IT. For me, in the vast majority of environments, it shouldn't be any different. When we talk about those more OT specific systems like the PLCs, the HMIs that are wired into those physical machines out in the real world, those are the ones where, again, we might not ever upgrade them unless we find that there's, let's say, a vulnerability with one of those systems that an attacker could use to literally kill somebody
Yeah.
or kill
Exclusively.
somebody at least. Then we have to take action. That's not something that you can't just leave there and do nothing about. Right? Doesn't matter how big or how small you are. If safety is an issue, you have to get it addressed. And then if it's some type of operational issue, right? How much is it going to cost the organization to be down for 12 hours?
Mm-mm.
If it's $5, they're probably not worried about it. If it's $500 million, they're probably going to be concerned about it, right?
Yeah.
So, and everything in between, it just depends. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
So it is one of those it depends kind of types of questions. Is there are those challenges of how do we patch when we have to stay up and running all the time? So we have to test, and retest, and there are a lot of assets in OT or ICS environments that you'll just never update,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So we have to ensure security is built around, right, defense in depth. Engineers hate the term defense in depth for some reason because I think they just say, well, it's an IT thing. But I know it's defense in depth, right? We have to add additional layers of security to protect those systems.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally right. So right now, what I've been doing in my last episode is that to break the vibe, with my guests, because I know like when we talk, about this kind of things, complicated things. So yeah, sometimes it's the time to talk about some kind of fun things to discover multicast. So I want to thank you so much for being open to that. And I'm gonna ask some funny questions. Yeah. I mean, so um, let's get back to your first job, the first job ever, and how long did you last in that job?
And my first job ever, I was a junior in high school. So I was like 17. and it was actually for a QA beta tester for software, and it was for a company. It was like a small company that actually was part of a much larger company that did. It was basically the predecessor to Microsoft Office.
Oh, wow.
So
Mm.
it was a huge product, and I was there about 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 months, and we actually, what's that? We actually got fired, for we were playing video games after hours, mind you, right? This is way no one had a PC at home, right? They were like 4 or 5,000 US dollars. So we had these PCs. And when I had a friend that I worked with, he brought a Star Trek video game. And so we would stay, like, again, after hours. We were not working during the work shift. It was like 9 o'clock one night, and the boss came in with a bunch of investors. And they just saw us. And the next day, they're like, yeah, we're gonna keep you around for a little bit. Basically, yeah, you're gonna have to, in 2 weeks, basically, you're not gonna be able to work here anymore.
Oh my god, Oh, that's good one. Thanks for sharing that. So okay, when it comes about the music, what is the favorite song?
That's yeah, that was a tricky one. Because it's hard. Yeah, I consider myself a big music person, at least for what I like. Um, my favorite song, probably for the last couple of years, is by a group called July Talk.
All right, it
And
is it one.
they
That's a good choice.
have a yeah, and they have a song called "Uninvited," which is not one of their more popular songs. But I don't know. There's just something about that I really like. Um, but I imagine the band would be okay. It might not resonate with folks, but like in the U.S., there was a guy named Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like old school, like kind country. Um, I don't know, tough guy, I guess. But also like, vulnerable at the same time in a way. Uh, and his wife, they had a really, kind of beautiful, like tragic, but, love story in the real world. And this band is kind of like what if they were, in a band today. And so I really, love that.
That's awesome. I like old school, by the way. To be honest, sometimes, I really, I can say like I prefer this kind of older music. I don't know why, like 2010. So yeah, I mean, I think, they are not making that kind of music, these days. I don't know why. The vibes, yeah, it changed a lot. Um, so okay, this question is a really amazing one. So if you had a superpower for one day, what would you choose and why? What is the superpower that you think about right now?
Yeah, yeah, I wish. Oh, sure, I could, I don't know, make world peace or heal people, but if I had to be selfish, I would just want to fly. Think it would just be really cool, should be like Superman out there flying around. Yeah, for sure.
Like, awesome. Okay. So I know, I have a lot of friends from United States, and I know that you're passionate about traveling, discovering the world. So if you win a free trip, but can only take a one thing with you, what is it? What is the thing that you're gonna take with you, and where it will be? So what's that country or that place that you wanna just be, or even a city, and what gonna you take with you? Only one thing.
Sure. Well, if it's a person, I would definitely take my girlfriend. We've been together for like 10 years. So, um, yeah, yeah, as far as like taking for me, I kind of these days, like I just kind of go and see what happens. Uh, I think, where we want to go, I probably still have, um, uh, I I think I still want to get to Paris. That's still on my list. That's one place I haven't been that I still want to get to. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So if you want to just also come to Tunisia, don't worry about that. Just let me know, and I'm gonna prepare everything for you. Okay, for you and your girlfriend. So don't worry about it. So coming back right now, to that kind of area when you said about talking about vulnerabilities, and so here the question come. um, about the role of vulnerability assessment and pen testing and the role of that, in ICS OT. So, is there any frameworks about pen testing and vulnerability assessment? Is that a regular thing, or is that, I don't know, like a thing which is specified by the law? Like each, I don't know, like each 1 year, 2 year, I have to make that pen testing or vulnerability assessment, or is it related to the choice of that OT environment and the people and decision maker?
Yeah, there's a lot of it depends in OTICS when it comes to pen testing, and if there's not a lot of people that do like a true like OTICS pen testers. I would say there are a lot of people in IT these days, especially IT consultants and even IT pen testers. And hey, I love pen testing.
Yeah, me too. That's the first thing that I did. Yeah, what?
And was that
Yeah, I mean, like it was my first job. I was a pen tester, and I love it. Yeah, I love the way you discover the vulnerabilities. You have to. By the way, because I know many of students they are following this podcast. It's not really that kind of Hollywood thing that when you discover vulnerability, it's gonna be exploitable. From the first time. So you have to be patient. You have to search this one. Sometimes, it's. I think it's really so hard to find the specific script that you can prove that vulnerability is exploitable. So, yeah, but I love it. Pen testing is something really, really close to my heart. Yeah.
yeah, mine too. In OT is it's interesting because you can't do true pen testing like of all assets in the environment because it goes back to you could crash a power plant, right? You could crash a water treatment, and you literally could hurt or kill somebody, right? So if that's ever in the equation, right? We don't do it. If I had a pen tester come to me and say, "Oh, we're just going to go at it full bore," without those considerations, I would be like, "Wait a minute,
Yeah.
time out." It would be a huge red flag. A lot of environments they don't realize that though, unfortunately. Um, so what typically happens, probably like 90% of the time, and I have friends that are the the long time OCICS pen testers is really they 90% of the time they're mostly doing IT pen tests, honestly, right? Very much like an assumed breach scenario, right? So they start off in IT and then see, hey, can we get into the DMZ between IT and OT, right? And then can we move into OT, maybe get that initial foothold on a Windows machine in OT? That's usually where a pen test will stop
Yeah.
because you've demonstrated, yeah, we can get from IT into OT. We're done, right? We don't, that, doing that would have, the chance of that impacting safety or production, right, is very, very, like minimal. Um, and so that's what most engagements actually look like. So it's not any, different than a normal IT pen test, which I think is what other surprises people, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if you are testing other types of assets like PLCs and HMI, you're usually doing that in a test environment. So, or maybe like I've done it in like manufacturing on a weekend where no one is around, right? In a very limited scope.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But yeah, so it's honestly, it's not that much difference. Now, and there's no standard or framework today. I would like to work towards changing that when there's time. But if you ask 10 people, and I get to be probably, friends or know, like, probably the top 10 OT pen testers in the world from all over the world. And if you ask those 10, like, how do you pen test OT? You will get 10 different answers. So there's a lot of overlap, just like in IT, right? There's a lot of overlap. We kind of all do like 95% of the same thing, but it's that 5 to 10% that makes what you do unique that I think everybody, right, needs to learn or be aware of. So, yeah. Like, actually, I have a pen test class that I'm doing, and it's pay what you can. It's just a one day, so it's a really an introduction, but it's a really full one day at the end of next month. Uh, so people are watching. It's going to be July of 2025, but yeah, people can come for free.
Mhm.
You don't need to pay. And it's actually already pretty close to being sold out. I'll probably do another version as well. We got almost 500 people signed up. Yeah. But if people are interested in learning more about, yeah, OT pen testing, yeah, we'd love to have them. So if you can make it, I know that it is US hours, so it's tricky, but you can also watch the recordings, and it'll end up on my YouTube channels, of course, as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Please provide me all the links. It's gonna be super useful for people watching this. And yeah, you talk about pen testing. Can you even like in the traditional IT environments? I was a supervisor, of one of my students, making a pen testing project in one of the companies. And he came to me one day and he told me, I found a vulnerability and I want right now to test that denial of service attack. So I was like, no, no, don't touch it. Always ask for permission. So you want to jack with, yeah, even in authorization. Exactly.
And yeah, and in OT now, it's get authorization and work with the engineers or the people that have designed the plant that know how it works, the physics of the plant to know, hey, can I do this without killing somebody or hurting somebody or bringing down the plant? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
which is really, more dangerous. Um, yeah. So coming right now to the emerging technologies, like people talking about the AI, quantum computing. So what is the link, between those kind of emerging technologies and, the ISIS and OT security in the future? Is there any link? Like we can just, link between that artificial intelligence because people when they think about any security field, they're gonna be like, yeah, AI gonna be there, quantum computing gonna be there. So what about the ICS?
Yeah, so quantum computing we don't really hear about in OD. Uh, Nobody really talks about it. Um, AI is a very different story, and it's just like in IT, right? Where like every vendor out there is building AI right into their products. Now, is it actually doing any good in some of those products? In some, sure, right? And I think that's also what we see in the OT world. You have every vendor building it in. Most of it is probably garbage at the end of the day. I love AI. I love Gen AI. I sit there, play with ChatGPT for writing, offensive and defensive tools. That's what my DEFCON presentation was last year at the ICS Village. And I just did one for the Sans ICS Summit, so I love it, but yeah, it's vendors just putting it in to say we have AI, right? I think just like in IT, right? It's just smoke and mirrors and they're just snake oil salesmen, Um, but I do, always want to reiterate to everybody, two things. One is the attackers are also using AI, right? And the attackers are always ahead. So people say, "Oh, well, AI is going to make it, so we're going to get ahead of the attackers." Like, no, I've been here. We're going to get ahead of the attackers my entire career, and yeah, it's never happened. And in some ways, sure, I wish it would, but it's there. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Plus, then I wouldn't get to do what I love, and and at the same time, it's in OT. There are already discussions of, oh well, I don't need people to run that power plant or that petrochemical facility, right? I can have AI run it. And that's where I would caution people, right? That, one day, sure, you
Mm.
know, uh, AI, right, is getting better exponentially every day. Amazing. Uh, am I going to turn over a power plant, or a train, right, to AI? No, not today. I'll, let's wait a little while before we start giving over control. And then, of course, we could have, 40-hour conversation on what happens if AI goes wrong. But it's on the surface, it's we have to remember the attackers are using it as well. And no, I don't want it running our plans autonomously, at least right now, until we know it's safe, it's secure. And I think we're definitely 5+ years away from doing that in at least large OT environments. That's usually when we talk about ICS. It's just really large OT environments like power plants.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I think it's gonna happen sooner or later. Why? Because in the traditional IT, we've seen some attacks based on AI. So right now, it's a need. We need right now some defense mechanism based on AI. So that's why we were obliged to integrate AI in some SOC, in some CM tools. So I think like if we see like an attack based on AI on some ICS systems, basically they're gonna just this is gonna push the people more to develop some methods based on AI, defense mechanism methods based on AI. So yeah, it's gonna happen. Yeah. Uh, literally, dear Mike, I wanna thank you so much. The episode, I mean, like it's super fast how the time goes so fast with you. And yeah, literally enjoy the talk, literally. So I want to finish with that question. So if someone want to specialize in ICS, security, that part, because you know what, like even when I was searching for some, I don't know, like resources on how to specialize in, the resources are so limited. People talking about only about this kind of SOC pen testing, but when I come just to your profile, it's so interesting. So, what kind of advices you just want to provide for the audience as they want to specialize?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, no, I'm glad we connected. Yeah, there are a lot of resources out there,
Yeah.
and which is why I started posting on LinkedIn and YouTube, because there's just nothing out there. Or if it's out there, it's really expensive, and you know, knowledge shouldn't have to be that way either. If somebody wants to do a little class and charge a lot of life, that's fine. But I think we also need to get that knowledge to everybody, whether they can afford it or not. And that's a lot of folks that work in OT or ICFs. But so yeah, if you want to, you know, get more into OT cybersecurity, you need a solid foundation in either IT cybersecurity, right? Or you need a solid engineering kind of automation design background. And so I get to work with, in my day job, I work with some of the most brilliant engineering minds in the world, right? And so I help them learn OT cybersecurity, right? Or again, like myself, right? I came from an IT cyber background. So I had to learn about these things called PLCs and HMIs, right? And how do these environments work? And how do we protect it?
Exactly.
And so so I would say you need a strong background in either, again, engineering or IT cybersecurity. So at least a couple of years, right? And then you can really start to get into OT cyber. It's like somebody trying to do pen testing, but not knowing anything about TCP/IP or network, right? You're just not going to be good at your job, right? If you don't know those basic fundamentals. So that's the same thing about transitioning into OT cyber. I get a lot of people say, "Hey, I'm just getting into cybersecurity. I wanted OT." It's like, that's great. Do IT cyber for a couple years at least. You can still learn about OT. Nothing, and I got a free 25+ hour, course on YouTube. People can go through the basics. But learn about it. But you need to master those fundamentals of the IT cyber to be able to make that transition. And so so learn the fundamentals, and then just remember that it is very doable to get into OT cyber. That's why I write the resources I do. It's why I post, because I remember when I started that Yeah, there was nothing out there and nobody wanted to have this conversation. And it was frustrating. And I came to, close to kind of giving up on it just completely because it was so frustrating. And I don't want other people to have to feel that way because it shouldn't. So don't think, yes, OT might sound really mysterious at first. It's just like anything, IT, right? And cybersecurity was probably very mysterious at first. But like pen testing, right? It's like very mysterious at first, but then you start learning, right? You start doing it. And then it's like, oh, but like I am doing this, yeah. And OT cyber is the exact same way. And the other thing just to think of, the I the IT community and IT cybersecurity is great. I would say though that the people that make up the OT ICS cybersecurity community it's just a million times more special. And almost everyone there is there to help you. There are a few jerks that will tell you, you don't belong here. I've heard it from all of them. Everybody knows it's like the same 3 people, right? Other than that, there are amazing, amazing people that are there to help you succeed because we believe in the mission, right? It doesn't matter who you are, where you live in the world, how much money you make, what type of environment you uh, work or live in. It's people deserve to be safe. They deserve to have the resources that they need to live their lives, like power, clean water, right? And the list goes on. But people deserve that, and the people in this community, they believe in that mission, and they want, we want to help other people, right, be on that mission as well. So it really is a great community. So yeah, it's don't let it scare you away. There are, again, that's why I wrote my YouTube course. I'll send you the links that you can share with everybody because again, there's an entire course you can take, and so it doesn't have to be mysterious. Even OT and pen test, right, doesn't have to be mysterious anymore, and it's very doable, and there are so many people here that are willing to help you. So if this is what you want to do, I'd say jump on in, and I'd be more than happy to help anybody and point the way.
Guys, Mike Holcomb, one of the most amazing experts in that field, and one of my favorites, to be honest, when it comes, to the knowledge you share. Thank you so much again for being in this podcast, the thoughts you shared, and all of that. So I hope literally to keep providing with that kind of energy on LinkedIn because I'm enjoying it. I'm sharing even your resources, and I hope also to see you in another episode. Why not? Because the talk is really so rich with information, and I really couldn't get enough. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Hopping, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you. See you guys.